In April 2018, I was invited to join a UNICEF field visit to Zambia. At the time, I didn't even know where Zambia was on a map, but after years of supporting UNICEF's work, I jumped at the opportunity to see it in action. The main purpose of our trip was to learn from Zambia's success in eliminating maternal and neonatal tetanus, or MMT, in 2007. MMT is caused by unhygienic birthing practices and kills 34,000 newborns every year, even though it is completely preventable. Since 2000, and in partnership with Kiwanis International, UNICEF has worked to eliminate MMT from 44 countries. However, because tetanus-causing bacteria lives in the soil, MMT can never truly be eradicated. We traveled to Zambia to learn about how it has worked with UNICEF to scale routine immunizations, clean delivery practices, and robust surveillance in order to sustain its elimination status. The Republic of Zambia is a landlocked country in southern Africa. Compared to some of its 8 bordering countries, Zambia is relatively peaceful, reformed, and functional. In contrast to the Syrian refugee crisis, the genocide of Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, and even the gun violence here in Chicago, it's hard for most Americans to understand why we should care about children in faraway places like Zambia. But like many developing countries, Zambia's peace and progress balances on a knife's edge. During my first full day in Zambia, I was surprised to learn that 40% of Zambian children are stunted, meaning they are physically and/or mentally underdeveloped and will never reach their full potential. I was also surprised to learn how interrelated all the issues actually were. Stunting among children is driven by shortage of food, but also by the young age of women giving birth. On average, Zambian women will have 5 to 6 live births over their lifetimes and start bearing children as young as 13 years old. Teen pregnancies are in part driven by culture, but also by high dropout rates from primary to secondary school. Approximately 90% of Zambian children attend primary school, but only about 30% attend secondary school. Without a holistic approach to tackling all of these issues, it'd be impossible to improve the lives of children in a sustainable way. With this backdrop, we set out to visit UNICEF programs in the field. Our first stop was the Kafue Mission Health Center. This health center was refurbished and expanded through the support from the European Union in 2015. When we walked into the facility, I was struck by how bare the rooms were. No fancy instruments, very few machines. There wasn't even electricity running while we were there. It was hard not to imagine some of my closest girlfriends who had recently given birth in the US and what it would have been like for them to have to give birth here. On the other hand, before the rehabilitation, the maternity ward only had 2 delivery beds and 2 beds for antenatal and postnatal patients. 6 hours after giving birth, new mothers were often forced to walk home, often traveling hours on foot. Now they could stay 2 to 3 days after giving birth. It was definitely an improvement. The health center also had an on-site incinerator and chlorine production facility to promote hygienic birthing practices, a huge step towards preventing MMT. There was a team of community-based volunteers conducting monthly outreach health services, teaching new mothers about health and nutrition, and driving mopeds repurposed as ambulances. There was even a peer-to-peer program to educate young girls on teen pregnancies and safe sex. While the new health center was originally funded by donations from the European Union, the UNICEF in-country team was hard at work to ensure the Zambian government would be ready to take over the program in 2019 by tracking and reporting results, coordinating with politicians, and training healthcare workers. It's a strategy that Shadrach from UNICEF's Lusaka office referred to as boots and suits, because UNICEF's impact has as much to do with its advocacy of government officials as its work on the ground. This is the moment when I came to appreciate what sets UNICEF apart from all other NGOs on the planet: its insistence on sustainability. The mental image of UNICEF volunteers handing out supplies at a refugee camp is only a small fraction of what UNICEF actually does. In fact, very rarely did we see UNICEF's cyan blue logo in Zambia. That's because UNICEF prefers to operate behind the scenes, innovating, advising, advocating, training. UNICEF has no interest in displacing national institutions. Instead, it works with them to ensure that they're honoring their commitments to children. Our next stop was a visit to the Zambezi Sawmill School to observe the administration of tetanus toxoid inoculations for young girls. Zambia has a national program in place that immunizes 68% of all mothers and children, which is now entirely self-funded. At the school, we had a lot of fun asking the girls about their favorite subjects and what they wanted to be when they grew up. Many of them wanted to be doctors, nurses, teachers, and journalists. On one hand, it was so incredible to hear about their big dreams and to know that they were getting much-needed vaccines. But on the other hand, it was heartbreaking to think about why they were needed. At 13 years old, they were now entering childbearing years, and a majority of them will have had at least one child by the time they reach 19. That feeling of simultaneous joy and heartbreak was a common theme throughout this trip. The next day, we visited the Highland Primary School, which operates as an open learning center in the afternoon. Also known as Second Chance Schools, open learning education encourages out-of-school youth to return to class by offering flexible education opportunities and reducing the stigma surrounding reasons why kids drop out in the first place, such as teen pregnancy and menstrual hygiene. Places like Highland are absolutely vital in a country where 15,000 girls dropped out of school in 2016 due to pregnancy. This school, led by the tenacious and inspiring Mrs. Mulandano, is funded by learning fees and donations from the community and parents. Once again, I was blown away by how the community bands together to create better lives for their children.
For me, African, I am black coffee, no sugar, no cream, love my color, don't you I am proud of my blackness, far from being a symbol of darkness. Color me black, color me beautiful, call me African.
The following day, we visited another program designed to keep children in school. The Sichimwa Community School was one of 37 resource-poor schools in the Zimba district that benefited from UNICEF-supported WASH interventions. With generous funding from UK aid, average pupil per toilet ratios decreased from 184 to 36, and group hand-washing facilities were installed. Sichimwa also had girl-friendly toilets with privacy and washing facilities to address menstrual hygiene management. A personal highlight from the trip was being able to sit down with these girls and talk to them about how the WASH program had enabled them to stay in primary school. We later learned, however, that many of the girls were afraid of graduating onto secondary school because the longer walk from home would make them more susceptible to rape. Once again, I felt that simultaneous joy and heartbreak. As the week wrapped up, it felt agonizing to leave. I'd fallen in love with Zambia. Its lush scenery, its vibrant community, its precarious potential. Even after being back for several weeks now, I can't stop thinking about those girls and their big dreams and their big fears. I wrestled with how to talk about my trip for some time. What was the message? Joy or heartbreak? Ultimately, I chose joy. Joy for the progress Zambia has made to date. Joy for WASH programs and second chance programs that are keeping children in school. Joy for the elimination of MMT. And most of all, joy for the field staff and community volunteers who, after we've flown home and assimilated into normal life, will keep working every single day until every Zambian boy and girl can realize their full potential. Sometimes the sum of the world's problems can seem overwhelming, but I find peace in knowing that in 190 countries and regions around the world where children are most vulnerable, there are really good people fighting for them. They are saving the world one child at a time.